Hi everyone, George Mount here. What I want to do in this video is provide a guided tour of Jupyter Notebooks, particularly with use of Python. So I am in a Jupyter session here. I will give you a link. This will be a cloud-based environment for working with Jupyter Notebooks. No downloads required. If you want to download Jupyter Notebooks and Python on your computer to work locally, I would suggest the Anaconda distribution. But just to make this easier for us, we are going to use a free cloud-based instance of Jupyter using Python. So if you're not familiar, Jupyter is a web-based notebook application. We can work with Python along with lots of different other languages, and I will show you the basics of working with Jupyter and to some degree the basics of working in Python. So let's go ahead and get started. I am in this session here. Again, this is a browser-based app that we can use to run Python, and I can locate some files here, but I'm going to go to New. We're going to start a new Jupyter Notebook using Python 3. So like I said, Jupyter can use a lot of different languages. We are going to focus on Python. It's probably the most common. I want to draw your attention to a few different sections of the notebook. Let's start up here at the top. This is the name of the notebook. So I can just click right here and give it a new name if I want. I'll just go ahead and call it something like hello. You can name it whatever you would like. That's really all we'll do with the name. And I will now go to the second menu bar here. So like most applications, our Jupyter Notebook has some menu-driven options. We're not going to get into all of these. There are quite a few. I will focus here on File. This will have some helpful operations for working with the notebook. We can create a new one. We can export it locally, download a copy, turn this into a Python script if you worked with that before. The extension for Jupyter Notebook is IPYNB. That stands for Interactive Python Notebook. You're not going to see many options here for saving. You will see the save and checkpoints. So one interesting thing with Jupyter is that these notebooks are saved automatically every 2 minutes. But there are some other options for working with files under the File menu here. Now, here are quite a few other ones. I do want to spend a bit of time here with the kernel. So the kernel is what actually drives the code and sends it to your computer to be executed. If you're ever having problems with your Python code not running or just your notebook is behaving strangely, I would suggest hopping over here to the kernel section. You can restart your connection. So this is kind of like restarting your computer or refreshing your browser when things are just buggy. This is a good place to start to do that. Now, like I said, there are a lot of other ones. Help. It's always good to check the help documentation when you're working with a new system or an old one for that matter. So there are some great documents here available for you. Now, this toolbar here has some icons. You can kind of think of it as almost like your quick access toolbar for Jupyter. A lot of these can also be found in the menu bar, but this is just a little easier of a way to get to them. And this brings us down to the code cell. So this is where we'll be spending the bulk of our time actually coding Python and building interactive notebooks. I will click in here. Now we will actually go back up to our quick access bar, so to speak. You'll get a few options if you click the drop down. I'm going to go to Markdown. If you're not familiar with Markdown, this is a way to style and render text using plain characters. This is not a full-born Markdown tutorial. If you want one of those, you can conveniently come up to Help and go to Markdown. But for right now, I will just show you a few just to give you a sense of what this is capable of. I can use these hash marks to give us headers. So 2 hash marks is header 2. I can italicize things using these underscores. I can make things bold if I use a couple of asterisks here. So there are a lot of different methods that we can use. And now I'm going to render this. If I go up to our toolbar, I will click Run. You will see that this now renders as it might in a Word document or something like that, and we get another cell block right here. There are a lot of different things you can do with Markdown. You could add images, you can embed things, videos, really you name it. It can become a very interactive notebook, and that's one of the draws of using Jupyter, is that you can build these really engaging, easy to look at and interpret documents to guide and go along with your code. But that's probably not why you're here to learn Markdown. Let's instead focus on code. You're going to see that we are now in a code cell block. So these are different cells. A Jupyter Notebook is composed of all of these different cells. And let's try one with code. So we're coding in Python. If you're not familiar with Python, I'll have some resources for you, but let's just start with the very, very basics here, such as basic arithmetic. So we could use Python as a fancy calculator. I can click Run here, and you're going to see that we see these numbered input and output cells. That's another feature of Jupyter. You're going to see the order in which you've run these cells will be numbered in that sequence. I'll try one more here. So again, any kind of arithmetic, this will follow the order of operations. So if I took 2 times 1 divided by 4, I can again go up here. There are a few keyboard shortcuts as well. So if you are an Excel person, then you'll love it in Jupyter because there are a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to do Control Enter. What that's going to do is run the cell and then drop down to a new cell here. And again, you'll see, number 1, number 2. So we can keep going there, order of operations, any kind of arithmetic, and the usual operators apply, multiplication, division, addition, and so on. Now, again, if you're coming from Excel, you probably really like functions. That's going to be a good breeze here in Python. I will find, for example, the absolute value of -100 and then Shift, Enter. That's another way that I can run this and then drop down to the next line. Okay, so those are the basics of working with Python and working in Jupyter Notebooks. Another great thing to know about is that if you ever get stuck, there is some help documentation available. As I mentioned up here, we can go to the help bar. Additionally, let's say, for example, you're used to using Excel, so something like this, finding the absolute value, would work. In Python, it does not. Python is case sensitive, so you do need to type in the way that the function was actually specified. And if you ever want to learn a little more about functions, you can run the help documentation. The question mark operator will do that for you. So I'm going to run that. You will see that this drops down a little menu here. We can learn a little bit more, and that is how you could get some help documentation. Another thing that you might see when you're just starting out with Python and Jupyter Notebooks is this little hash symbol. So what this indicates is a comment. Comments are for people, not machines. So I'm going to select that, and then I can just do whatever arithmetic here. I'm going to run that, Control Enter, and what you'll see is that anything after that hash sign is not executed by the computer. This is only for people and not machines. So comments are a great way to help you document what you did and why, any assumptions you had, because just like any workbook you've ever seen that you just don't understand what's going on, comments help in that regard too with Python, just as a written record of what you did and why. Okay, so those are the basics of working with Python, working with Jupyter Notebooks in particular. We covered the 4 sections here, and I will have a file that you can check out and follow along with this. Again, this is an interactive web-based session, so if you wanted to work with Python locally, there are a couple of more steps, but I will include a book that will go over all of that, recent book that I've written. So that's all I've got for Python and Jupyter Notebooks. Hope that this was a helpful guide for you, And please like this as well, share it with your friends. It seems like everybody wants to learn Python and learn about Jupyter Notebooks these days, and I really haven't seen that many tours of Jupyter like this, so I'm hoping that this can help a few people out. All right, until next time, thanks everybody. Take care.